US President Donald Trump has said he made no progress with Vladimir Putin on ending the Ukraine war in a phone call on Thursday. This as the Kremlin insisted that the Russian president would stick to his aims in the conflict. Trump said he and Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke about Iran and the war in Ukraine during a pretty long call. He said he did not make any progress on a deal to end the fighting in Ukraine, and he is not happy about that.
We had a call. It was a pretty long call. We talked about a lot of things, including Iran. And we also talked about, as you know, the war with Ukraine. And I'm not happy about that. I'm not happy about it. No, I didn't make any progress with him today at all.
Trump's view of the phone call was unusually bleak after most of his previous 5 calls with Putin since returning to power in January this year. He has given optimistic reports of all the progress towards a deal in the past. On the other hand, the Kremlin said Putin, in a nearly hour-long call with Trump, insisted that he would not give up on Russia's goals in the conflict with Ukraine.
Наш президент также сказал, что Россия будет добиваться поставленных целей, то есть устранения всем известных первопричин, приведших к нынешнему положению дел, к нынешней острой конфронтации. И от этих целей Россия не отступится.
Kremlin aide Yuri Yoshakov said Trump proposed a swift ceasefire in Ukraine, while Putin emphasized the importance of resolving the conflict through political negotiations. According to the TASS agency, the Kremlin aide said that Putin in the call with Trump highlighted Russia's significant contributions to the formation of the United States. The Russian president underlined Moscow's role in the American War of Independence 250 years ago and the Civil War, which ended 160 years ago. He also noted that Russia and the US share deeper historical roots beyond their alliances in World War I and World War II. The conversation between Trump and Putin, it comes days after Washington announced a decision to pause some weapons shipments in a blow to Kiev, which has been reliant to Western military support. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky was visiting ally Denmark on Thursday to meet leading European Union officials. Zelensky told EU allies in Denmark that doubts over US military aid reinforced the need for greater cooperation with Brussels and NATO. Zelensky said that he expects to have a telephonic conversation with Trump maybe tomorrow.
What about our bilateral relation with the United States and this support? So I hope that maybe tomorrow or in close days, these days, I will speak about it with the President Trump.
And for more on this, we're now being joined by Ben Aris, founder and editor-in-chief of BNE IntelliNews and also former Moscow bureau chief of the Daily Telegraph. He's joining us live on the show from Berlin. Welcome to WION, Mr. Aris. First up, this was perhaps the 6th phone call between Trump and Putin, but this time around, Trump did not sound optimistic. He was rather sounding bleak. He said no progress made with Russia. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says that the talks were constructive and frank. Your assessment of where the war headed to as of now, and your assessment of the phone call as well.
No, thanks for having me. Yeah, 6th call that we know about. We think they actually talk more often than that. But look, this is fairly, how shall I say, the process has been going on since February, when the ceasefire talks began and there was the first face-to-face meeting. And at that point, I think Putin was optimistic and he was in a mood to compromise. He does want to bring this war to an end in so much as that they haven't made much progress. After 3 years, they've taken 20% of Ukraine, and any gains from this point on have been incremental. And it's costing a lot of money. The Russian economy is hurting because of it. But at that point, in the beginning, Putin came with a list of concessions that he was demanding from Ukraine. Basically the same deal that they did in Istanbul in 2022. And that includes things like Ukraine never joining NATO, and particularly that the international community have to recognize the sovereignty of Russia over the 5 regions, if you include Crimea, that they've occupied. And Trump got on board with that. He basically backed Putin. He went to Zelensky with his quote-unquote final offer in April at a meeting in London, and repeated all of the demands that Putin had made. And Zelensky, with his European allies, rejected that offer and said there has to be an unconditional ceasefire for 30 days before any negotiations can start. And Putin rejected that. And that's where we stand today. That Putin is not prepared to do any talks without getting those concessions. Zelensky's not prepared to make those concessions. So there's no middle ground. And the war is going in Russia's way. And it's been made worse for Ukraine just this week because Trump has cut off the supplies of crucial missiles that Ukraine needs to defend itself, air defense missiles.
Right, Mr. Harris, just to take that point further, you say that there has been no middle ground between Ukraine and Russia, and clearly Putin has not been interested in providing concessions to the West. At this point of time, what perhaps can the West do to make Putin come on the negotiating table?
Very little. I mean, if Trump is not going to supply Ukraine with air defense missiles, then the skies are open. Russia has ramped up its production of its military equipment. You know, the number of artillery shells has gone from 1 million to 4 million a year. The missiles, it was running out of them in the first year, and now they're producing more missiles than they're firing. And so he's just going to bombard Ukraine until it collapses. And without US support, specifically US support, he can do that. And as for Europe, they've also run down their stockpiles. They don't have any more Patriot missiles left to send to Ukraine. They sent 24 F-16s, but then Russia has 300 fifth-generation fighters. And Europe is simply not equipped, it's not producing the equipment to replace the States. And so, as far as I'm concerned, Ukraine is now being backed into a horrible corner, and it's going to fight. It's heroically fighting, but I don't see in this missile war that this has become from a drone war. That Ukraine just simply doesn't have the equipment to continue the fight for any length of time. Maybe this summer, I think, and in the autumn, we'll probably come to another round of talks with Ukraine in a significantly worse position.
But Mr. Harris, we have to talk about the statement that came out of the Kremlin after that phone call between Trump and Putin. The Kremlin said that it rather reminded Putin about Russia's significant contributions to the formation of the United States of America. What do you make of that statement?
Well, they're trying to keep the states on board. I mean, Putin has to keep the door open for eventual negotiations because he's still banking on Trump coming in and pressuring Ukraine to concede, give him all the concessions that he's asking for. And like I just suggested, that this could possibly happen this autumn. So he can't burn the bridge with Trump. And his personal relationships with Trump seem to be pretty good. The two men get on with each other. And so the Kremlin hype up, the points of common interest. Russia played a key role in the Second World War with American help. So they used to be allies. And he's trying to remind Trump of things like that. And Trump, I think, is open to it. That he does see, in that sense, Russia an ally. I mean, the other parallel track for these talks is that Trump himself is very keen to do business with Russia. He said clearly that he wants minerals, he wants oil and gas deals. He sees a lot of opportunity. And so Putin's playing to all of those things too and saying, look, I'm your partner. We can do business. We've just got to solve this Ukraine problem. And Zelensky is stuck his heels in. And that's the problem. And so we're just going to pound him. And Trump made this comment of like, sometimes you've got to let the kids in the playground just fight it out. And so we're at that page. He's going to let Russia and Ukraine fight for the summer and then maybe revive things in the autumn. And then all those business deals will come back and concessions on the sanctions might come back. And Putin's looking down the road at that event.
Right, Mr. Harris, thanks very much for joining us here on WION with your insights on this.
My pleasure.